Some views hold, no, some of the Rishonim saying it has to be like Diglei Midbar, it has to be like the Jews when they were in the desert. There were 600,000 people there. That's what classifies as Rishut Harabim. And there are very few roads in the world that will carry 600,000 people in any given day. And Rav Adi for many years said, the Sfaradim always like the Shulchan Aruch, you shouldn't use an Eruv in a big city because that is a psak of the Shulchan Aruch. Many years later, when you paskin for 60 years at the highest level, you can change your mind every now and again. And he wrote Tshuva in Yabiyah Omer Chelek Tet, where he said, you know what, maybe there are grounds to permit, maybe there are views in the Shulchan Aruch that hold that actually he is lenient. He holds that you only need, he holds like the lenient opinion that you need 600,000 people. He bases it on a few things that I won't go into now. So he does have a kula in the end, but a chumrah to begin with. He has another chumrah that's very interesting to me. He says you can't pull from a kli rishon, so you have an urn on Shabbos. You can't pull from there into a cooked dish that's yavish, right? So it's boiling hot, okay? It's boiling hot, and it's just come off the flame, but you can't pour boiling water into that. So you ask why? The food is still fully cooked, it's come off the fire. It's still a kli rishon, it's fully cooked. We know that when you pour boiling water from a kli rishon, it's mevashel de klipa. The water coming out of the kli rishon is also cooks. So why can't you put one for the other? So he based on the Shulchan Aruch, because the Shulchan Aruch says there's a machloket whether there's bishlach or bishul belach. That means on Shabbos, you can't, if you have a solid food, then you cook the schnitzel. Okay, cook the schnitzel. Now you want to reheat it from the fridge. Okay, so there's no issur of bishul. I mean, there might be other problems of putting it on the flame, but from a cooking perspective, from the malacha of cooking, of bishul, there's no such thing as recooking a cooked food that's solid. You cooked it already, it changed its form, it was raw, now it's cooked. You put it back on the flame, you might have transgressed some other issur d'Rabbanan or the hagdaras that Chazal put in place for bishul, but the actual malacha of cooking you didn't transgress. When it comes to a liquid, so if you have soup that you cooked and then it cooled down, you put it back in the fridge, if you put that on a hot plate or on a heat source on Shabbos, according to many Rishonim, that's a malacha d'oraita. You've just recooked. It's bishlach or bishul belach. There's such a thing as recooking liquids, and you're stuffed. You've just transgressed the malacha d'oraita, the biblical prohibition of bishul. So that's what Shulchan Aruch says. Yesh bishlach or bishul belach. You can't reheat a liquid food on Shabbos. The Ramah comes along and says, you know what? If you took it off the flame, your soup, so long as it hasn't fully cooled down, it's done in the gamra. It's not fully cooled down. You can put it back on the flame. You can return it, as long as you have in mind you were going to return it and you were holding on to it. But from the point of view of bishul, he says, don't worry, you put it back on. So the Ramah, it's not clear what the Ramah exactly holds, because he's saying something that's 30 degrees, 35 degrees, you can put it back on the flame and reheat it. It's definitely dropped below Yad Soledet. It's definitely dropped below the level that we would call it cooked in the first place, and yet he allows you to reheat it. But the Ramah is more lenient there. It seems the Ramah holds that there isn't really a concept of it's not a problem to reheat liquids, principally according to Ramah. So Rav Adia says, based on this, that you can't pour from a kli rishon from a kli rishon hot water from an urn into solid food, because he's worried that the water is going to cool down its way basically, and it's going to suddenly get recooked when it hits the solid food, which is tremendous chumrah, but it's like the Shulchan Aruch. But what's fascinating about that is when you come on some of his kulas in Hilchot Shabbat, where he uses the same thing for the opposite. For example, Rav Adia paskins that you can put lach on the hot plate before the hot plate comes on. So Rav Adia says there's a issur d'Rabbanan on Shabbos of something called chazara, that you can't put something on a flame from the fridge. You can't take something out of the fridge and put it on the flame on Shabbos, because Chazal were concerned that you would stoke the coals, you would come to increase the flame. Okay, so when we want to put things on a flame on Shabbos, we have to do something called a blech. I don't know if the blech has a name in Sephardi language. A blech is a Yiddish word. You have a metal covering for the flame. Now we don't normally use an open flame on Shabbos in our flat. We have a hot plate. So there's a machloket whether a hot plate is considered like an open flame or a closed flame. Rav Moshe was lenient. Rav Moshe said it's not derech bishul. No, people don't normally cook on a hot plate. Even if you can cook on a hot plate, people don't normally cook. Rav Adia said that a hot plate not only is not derech bishul, but he said it's already clear gabe clear. It's already considered as if you've got another kli on top of it. Because one of the things you have to do if you want to take a schnitzel from the fridge in Ashkenazi, and you don't hold like Rav Moshe, you want to put it on the hot plate on Shabbos, you can put it down on top of another kli. You've already got something on the hot plate that was on from before Shabbos, you can put it down on top of that kli, or you can put an overturned kli on the hot plate and put it on top of that. But Rav Adia says you can put liquid on the hot plate before the hot plate comes on, and the hot plate will come along and heat it. Now we've just said, according to Shulchan Aruch, if you reheat that liquid to Yad Soledet, you've transgressed the melacha d'oraita of bishul. So I put it on the hot plate when the hot plate is on and it reaches Yad Soledet, I've just transgressed the melacha d'oraita of bishul. And yet he allows me to put it on the hot plate before the hot plate comes on, and the hot plate will come on and cook it. This is a tremendous kula, because the Shulchan Aruch doesn't hold it. The Shulchan Aruch holds that there's bishlach or bishul balach, you're in trouble. So it's a tremendous leniency, and when you consider that bishul is the only malacha really, that the the main point of the melacha bishul is it's done by way of a grama. That's causative. You put it on the flame. You don't do the melacha immediately. You put it on the flame, and after a few minutes, it heats up and it cooks. The whole mahut, the whole essence of the melacha bishul is that it's done by a grama, and yet it's done by causative delay. And yet he allows you to put it on the hot plate and allows it to cook. It's tremendous. It's tremendous kula. He also allows a similar thing. It's commonly thought that you can ask a guy to do anything for you on Shabbos. It's not true. Anything you're not allowed to do on Shabbos, you're not allowed to ask a guy to do either. But Chazal has certain leniencies. You need it for a mitzvah, you need it for a child, you're not well. There's certain leniencies. It's a melach d'Rabbanan and it's a mitzvah. He held anything that's a machloket in Hilchot Shabbat, you can ask a guy to do for you. But it's commonly known that anything that's a psik ratio you can ask a guy to do for you. So if you can't open your car door because the light's going to come on, or you can't open your fridge because the light's going to come on, you can't turn the tap on because when you turn the tap on, hot water is going to come out of the tap and cold water is going into the tank. It's going to hit the hot water. It's going to cook. That's a psik ratio. It's not a positive melacha. There's no delay, but it's not your intention when you turn on the tap. You're doing a permissible action. You're opening the tap so the water can come out. But as an immediate and inherently connected result, an absolutely impossibly disconnect result, cold water enters the tank, hits the hot water and cooks. That's a psik ratio. So everyone agrees you're allowed to. I believe everyone agrees you're allowed to ask a guy to do a malach that's only a psik ratio for you on Shabbos. You can ask him to do. You can say, "Can you please open my fridge for me? I left the light on. Can you open the fridge? I'm not allowed to open it." But he says anything that's a machloket, you can ask a guy to do. So if I've got my soup and I want to cook it on Shabbos. So the Rambam and the Rashba and some of the Rishonim hold you're allowed to recook a liquid on Shabbos. We don't pass it that way. No one passes that way in this room. Everyone holds you're not allowed to take soup cold from the fridge and heat it up on Shabbos. And because the Rambam holds that, so Rav Ovadia would say you're allowed to ask a guy to heat it up for you on Shabbos. There's tremendous leniency. There are many other machlokot in Hilchot Shabbat where he would say the same thing. Just a couple of others, if I may. He has a tremendous leniency in the din of Hatzmana. There's a din called Hatzmana on Shabbos, which is basically that you're not allowed to insulate food. So bishul is cooking. Then the Chazal created 3 Isuri D'Rabbanan to protect the melacha of bishul. They were worried shehiyah, which means you're not allowed to leave something cooking from before Shabbos unless it's reached a certain level of cooking. You can't put raw food or sort of partly cooked food on the hot plate or in an oven from before Shabbos and allow it to continue cooking. Chazara, that means you can't return something to the flame once you've taken it off on Shabbos unless you fulfill certain conditions. Hatzmana, you cannot insulate food on Shabbos. You can't wrap it in towels. People wrap things in towels and put them on the hot plate.